All right, good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Rafe Granger podcast. And I was just having a one-to-one, which are these things we do in BNI, where we meet our fellow BNI members and we get to know them and we get to hear about their businesses. And I started to ask my guest, who will introduce himself in a minute, about what he does and how he learned it. And it was really interesting. And I was like, oh, let's turn this into a podcast. He was gracious enough to do so. So I'd like to introduce Dan Ridley. Good morning, Dan.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. So tell the people that are listening just who you are and a little bit, like 30 seconds about what you do.
Yeah, my name is Dan Ridley. I am a woodworker. I own Katarina Woodworks up in Dover, New Hampshire. And I am a custom woodworker. I make all sorts of things. I specialize in making custom cutting boards with inlays and engravings, but I also make big things like built-in closets.
Yeah, you were just showing me that, and I love how the drawers have the soft close. So what prompted me to turn this into a podcast episode was I was talking with Dan, and I was like, "Hey, how do you learn what you do? Is it, part instinct and part YouTube?" And Dan, tell the people that are listening how you learn.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I everything I know is pretty much off of YouTube. You start in the DIY sector,
Yeah,
and you like figure out what do I need to make these things, and you buy your first drill, you buy your first circular saw, maybe a couple clamps or something, depending on what you want to make. And I've completely self-taught and YouTube taught. I was about to tell you about how I've been thinking lately. I'm kind of stuck and I want to learn more. And it's like it's either going to be go shadow someone or go to school or something, just part time. Trying to learn more skills because the stuff that I want to learn now is more hands-on and practice, like one-on-one learning, than watching a video to learn. It's kind of getting more difficult.
yeah, you were saying that you've kind of outgrown what there is available on YouTube.
Exactly.
Makes
You know,
total sense.
a lot of the content on YouTube is more like the DIY space, I call it. Like the simple table you build, or like a shelf,
Yeah,
or you know what I mean, like
it'd be
more
my
like.
level basically.
No, you're better than that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Did you those, I see these things on Facebook. I'm not a huge Facebook surfer, but I see these things where masterclass, like they'll show the guy who played the theme song to like Beverly Hills Cop. I can't think of who that is, and he'll be like, "How about masterclass in piano?" Do they have that for woodworking? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure.
And what
Uh,
about those? Have you heard about those sites called Linda and some of those other sites where you actually pay a monthly fee, and then there's supposed to be content on there like for photographers and
yeah. Well, side note, I used to subscribe to Lynda.com back in my web coding days when I used to code websites by hand. I used to learn off of that, but
okay.
I haven't been on there since, to be honest with you. And I'd
I've
be
never
loving.
even been on. I've only heard
Yeah,
about it. Is it any
yeah.
good?
I mean, I thought it was great content. Like Lynda.com had great content, but I since got out of that. But it was mostly like technical
Oh,
skills, like more computer based learning to to learn like coding or learning photography, or learning how to edit photos or video, like stuff, things you do on the computer mostly. It might have changed since then. I don't think I've looked at Lynda.com in the last 10 years, to be honest.
I've never even been on. I've only heard about it.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my hair. I've got like COVID hair going on. I've got like my
Ooh, you
my
don't even want
front
to know. You don't
my
even
front
want to
piece is like
know.
popping up. Um, well, you shared this with me last time we had a one-to-one, but the listeners haven't heard this. I love what I call your origin story, which is
Mhm.
tell me again, and everybody's listening, tell them how you got started in this.
All right. So back way back in 2014, I had just got married a couple years prior, and we were living in this small house, and we didn't have a coffee table in our living room. And I'm like, I need a coffee table, like let's go start looking for one. And I was poor, man. I had no money, and started looking. Nothing that I really wanted in my home was affordable. And the closest I got was at IKEA. I found something I liked, and it was $80 for a coffee table. And I'm like, I'm not paying $80 for a coffee table. no way, I couldn't afford that. I just got married. And so I'm like, all right, I'm handy. My dad's been a handyman, my whole life. He's done a lot of stuff around the house, and he had all the tools I needed. So I said, all right. I called up my dad and I was like, hey, let me borrow your little table saw and your little chop saw. And I had my own drill at the time, nothing I was proud of. But I ended up going to the local store and picked up some old pallets that they were throwing out. And I tore apart the pallets, brought all the tools to my basement. Didn't have a single light in my basement at the time. I had to use table lamps that I brought from upstairs and made myself a coffee table. Just basic skills. All I had at my disposal was what my dad had taught me, and made myself a coffee table. And I was so proud of it. I threw it up on Facebook. People loved it. I was like, that was fun. I want to do something else. So started watching YouTube. Like, oh, what else can I build? Started surfing the internet. What else? What else? What else? And it just turned into an addiction, man. And
Really?
I just was like, I kept watching YouTube and I was like, oh, I want to build that, but I don't have that tool. I saved up and bought it, so I could build that project. So it
I love
just
it.
kept going and going and going from that point on.
I want to hear more, but I have two observations slash question.
All
So
right.
you don't know this yet, but I've been working on a corporate speech or a book idea where I've been very fascinated in my own life, especially as I started to do this business coaching about 4 years ago, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've like reinvented myself, about four different times professionally. You just invented yourself professionally with that story and how it led. And I've been fascinated with in my bankruptcy work, I would see a you or a me reinvent myself successfully, meaning could earn a living at it. And then I would see other people, work at Fidelity, take their retirement, liquidate it, buy a boutique, and then have to file bankruptcy 6 years later. And I'm like, what's the difference? Like there's all these entrepreneur books that say, go do it, get off the couch and da 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 da. And I'm like, no, there's got to be more than just the doing it part. And I think and what I want to do is find out what the recipe of that is, write a
Mm-hmm.
book about it so that other people can do the recipe and not have to file for bankruptcy. And I think you
Totally.
illustrated it. I've been noticing it took me like a year to 2 years to figure out the recipe is. This is what I think the recipe.
All
The
right.
recipe is the idea comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and then you seem to share something that I seem to share that other people have said, which is we're fearless and or I call it naive. So like you were like, I'm not going to buy an $80 IKEA table. I'm just going to build one. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's where most people will fail in their endeavor because they'll either stop and tell themselves, I can't build one. I don't have the tools to build one. I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
space to build one. And you didn't do that. You exemplified what I call the next stage, which is you have the idea, then you do have to get off the couch and go do it, and not either be fearless or am I naive? Like I don't even know how I could fail. I don't even think of the ways. Not because I'm
Yeah.
smart, but I just don't realize it. And
Yeah.
then you did that. So you're like, I went in my basement. It wasn't the perfect space. I didn't even have lights. So I looked around and I grabbed lights. You didn't go get a loan for $10,000 to buy a table saw. You reached out to your resources. That's one of my keys, which
Yeah.
was your dad because he had the tools. You reached out to another resource, which is, I don't know how to do it, but I'll learn.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. And then you did it. And that
Yep.
seems to be, and then from doing it, we then learn what are the next steps to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't create that. That's from a book I read called The Lean Startup, which is to do the thing first. And when you do the thing first, you'll learn what you need to even learn.
Yeah.
And so that's just so cool I love the story about how the basement and you had to bring down table lamps because that's very counterintuitive. I think a lot of business people think, oh, I got to go get an SBA loan, form a
Yeah.
corporation, and then buy all this equipment. Nope.
No,
You don't know
yeah.
this about me, but my very first entrepreneur story where I invented myself professionally was as a magician. I
Oh,
was
really?
16 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and this kid in school, his name was Clay McBride, which, by the way, his brother Jeff McBride is a professional magician, even today.
Oh,
But
wow.
Clay McBride comes into school and he shows me this magic trick that blew me away. And I was like, how did he do that? And he would not tell me. He's like, a magician does not share secrets. I was like, ugh.
Plus.
So I kept bugging my mom. He's like, go to this magic store in the little town that I grew up, the little city, and buy a book. And I kept, this was back in the day, no YouTube. I couldn't
Yeah.
drive yet. I was bugging my mom, mom. She finally brought me. I bought the book and I learned how to do the trick. Oh, I forgot a key component of that. I went home and I tried to figure out how to do the trick myself. And I
Okay.
showed it and it wasn't quite there. But what it was is he took a silk in one hand. So it's a silk, like a silk square. He
Yep.
pushed it into this hand, went like this, disappears. This hand's empty. Okay. This
Yep.
hand disappears, goes like this, pulls the silk out of here. And this hand was empty.
Hmm.
So I was like floored. So I did it with a napkin where I tried to like squeeze it through here real quick. So I went like this and then went into this hand. And he's like,
Yep.
that's not how you do it, but that's really pretty good. Sent me to the magic store. And then from the magic store, I learned that trick, which I won't reveal. And I
Ah.
got a book on magic. So I would do the tricks. I was showing my mom. And then eventually, after like 6 months, she's like, hey, those are pretty good. You should do, she was a school teacher. You should do kids' birthday party magic shows. I'm like, Mom,
Hmm.
I'm 16. What parent is going to hire? And I was like little. I was a little guy. I'm like,
Yeah.
I look like I'm 12. What parent is going to hire me? And she's
Hmm.
like, no, you'd be surprised. Those birthday parties are expensive. You go to Burger King at the time, it's a lot of money. So you'll love this, Dan. In shop class, okay, back in the day,
Yep.
I was in my printing shop where we had to do the little typesetting with the blocks.
Hmm.
So I printed myself about 200 business cards with my name on it. And then my mother said to me, I didn't know how to send them out. She's like, go down the street. So and so's got a kindergartner. Knock on the door and say you'll do Junior's birthday party. I'll do. I didn't have any magic show.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of tricks. I had no show put together. I didn't know what I was gonna do. Knocked on the door. Said, here, I'll do this for free. Okay. Went home. Built a magic show, which was just all the tricks I owned. Did the show. Of course, it was, half good, half. I was like, oh my God, that was a wreck. Put my business card in every kid's little goodie bag. My mom told me to do that.
Yeah.
And the mother loved it. She's like, that was really good. I felt like a complete fraud. Oh, you'll like this too. At a yard sale, my mother found for me an old tuxedo with like
Oh,
tails. It was
yeah.
like a kid's tuxedo and one of those top hats that squish down and you can hit and they flop out. I don't know where she found that stuff. I wish I had the top hat to this day. I don't have it and I don't know why. I don't have the tails either. Anyway, I put my card, Dan, I was a working children's musician from
Wow.
16 to 18, pulling in $200 a week. I was doing 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, $50 to $75 a show, cash money, which
Look
again,
at
think
you.
that was 1986, you know, 200
Wow.
bucks a weekend was a lot of money,
Wow.
all from that formula of think the idea, do it first,
Hmm.
then, and so after I did about 4 or 5 magic shows, I then could construct a magic show and have a
Hmm.
theme to it and all this stuff. But
Yeah.
anyway, I share with you my first entrepreneurial venture.
Definitely. I agree with your formula. And, I was going to add there that, a lot of times the financial aspect is a huge barrier to entry. And every situation's different. But in my situation, I had the resources to get what I needed with no cost, so that was my situation, but if I needed to go out and buy a table saw and something else, I wouldn't have done it. Honestly, I
That's right.
wouldn't have done it. And that's a lot of times the financial aspect is huge for things like this.
I did the same thing when I did my magic shows. I didn't have the linking rings yet.
Mhm.
I didn't have the funnel in the newspaper yet. I didn't have any of those tricks. It was all coins,
Yeah.
cards, and a
Mhm.
few of the other uh, chips. I think for Christmas I got a magic set, and there's like a couple 10, 12 types of tricks in there. And then from that money, from the profit, I would then buy the
Mhm.
next trick up.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
That's pretty much exactly what happened in my situation. Is that this shop full of tools? It took me since 2014 to get where I am, and that's just starting small, selling what I could with whoever wanted to buy it, saving that money, and watching YouTube to see what else I wanted to make,
Hmm.
and using that money towards the next thing. You
So
know,
would you say it was fearlessness? What made you think that you could build a coffee table and then actually do it? What was it that got you over that hurdle?
uh, honestly, I didn't have a doubt in my mind that I could build it. Not a doubt. Just I had, as long as I had my dad's tools. I borrowed a table saw and a chop saw. That's it. I had a hammer and I had a cordless drill. That's all I used to build this thing. And I used free wood. And like it. So the barrier to entry financially was practically nothing. And I had no doubt in my mind I could build it. I mean, I've built random things with my dad. I used to sit in the garage and just screw two boards together for fun, you know, and and um,
Yeah.
and I've always been the tinkering type, like with building stuff. I can just put it together for the heck of it, and like one time, I just remember this story. Like, to go off of that, I had a treehouse when I was young, and I built a gutter system on it using some old pipe, old steel kids slide. So the slide was part of the gutter, and made it go all the way down to the other end into a hole, just
That's
because I felt like
amazing.
it. So I'm like, I have no doubt I could build this coffee table. I just had to go get the tools from my dad,
Huh.
go get the free wood, and make it. Like, it
See,
was no doubt in my mind.
that's a key component too, I think, is that the difference is I think there's those of us that have no doubt, but like my magic show example, I was filled with doubt.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was old enough. I didn't think the moms would believe me. I didn't think the kids would sit still long enough. I didn't think I had enough tricks. I didn't think I was good enough. But somehow, and I don't know why, again, I think it was my naivete, I just did it anyway. Even though I
Yeah.
was filled with doubt, I did it anyway. It's the doing
Yeah.
that created. And then after I did it, I was like, that wasn't half bad, you know?
Hmm.
I didn't think it
Yeah.
was worth the $50 she paid me, but but or the next one because I did that one for free. But
Yeah.
I remember the moms, sometimes they'd give me $100, right? My charge was 50. They'd give me 100. And I didn't grow up in an affluent area. I grew up on a farm, rural New York.
Okay.
And I said to them, what, $100? Like that was a lot of money to me. I didn't, like my allowance I think was $7 and or 14,
Yeah.
I can't remember. And I had to mow the lawn and it was a huge yard. And so I said to these moms, I was like, what? They're like, are you kidding me? They're like, you just entertained these kids in my house, the mom's house, for 45 minutes. She's like, I got to sit here and drink coffee, smoke a cigarette, talk to my friends. You entertain them. And if I had to go to Burger King, that would have been $200 plus the
Yeah.
cake, plus the food. I was like, oh,
Yeah. Makes financial sense.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty awesome, and like that's a great example of what we're speaking about too. It's two great examples.
What's
You know,
the example you see?
no, like that you were, for your formula that you were talking about,
Oh,
that
yeah.
you just went into it, and you like it just exploded. And
Even though
I
I was
think
scared.
it's like, I know every situation is different, but in my own experience, I've noticed that the things that work out for you in life are not the things that you plan for.
Hmm.
They just happen. And it happens through keeping an open mind, using your resources, and just going with it and not being afraid to try something. And
See, that's what I'm questioning though. I used to think that luck
okay,
or the right place at the right time. I do think there's luck. I do think there's that the right place at the right time. But I'm actually because otherwise there's Dan the entrepreneur, there's Rafe the entrepreneur. Why does it work for those two but not for Sally? Oh, because um, things just happened right for Dan. No, it's actually not true. We created those things to happen
mhm.
because you saw
Okay,
the
yeah,
video. You decide. I'm not like trying to disagree with you, but that's what my epiphany was. Is I was like, wait a minute, it didn't just happen. You went out and made the flipping table. Then
yeah,
from that stuff happened. Yes.
Yeah. I
Yes.
okay, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
It's not like you were just lucky that the table fell in your lap. But I do like the part that you were fearless. I don't seem to have that. Like people call me fearless because I went and did the magic show. I'm like, no, I was scared the whole way. As a matter of fact, I actually didn't do it in college, magic
Mm.
shows. My mother was my big promoter. She was like, you should just go up to college and tell the professors you do these magic shows. They'll love it. I'm like, no, I got to quit. Because I used to have such anxiety over the weekends planning for these shows. Like I took it very seriously.
Sure.
And if my prestidigitation skills were not up to par, like I practiced, like I literally,
Mhm.
even though these were kindergartners through first, second, third grade, I didn't want to flub a trick. And
Yeah.
oh, and I created this other crazy rule for myself. In the world of magic, there's what are called self-working tricks. Um, the only skill that's required is the banter or the presentation of it, which is a skill. But I tried to use as little gagged or self-working tricks as possible. A lot of my tricks would require sleight of hand. And
Uh,
so if I flubbed it, then I felt bad, even though they were like second grade. Anyway, I'd be so anxious about it. I was like, no, I need a break. I can't do these shows anymore.
oh yeah, you're holding yourself up to a higher standard.
Yeah, if I could go back over time, I would have been like, dude, do the tricks you want to do and pick the self-working tricks. Like an example of a self-working trick is like you see the magician and have like a wand and it turns into a bouquet of flowers. Like
Yep.
there's a gag to that. There's a mechanism that makes that work. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean by self-working tricks.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Unlike the silk trick. The silk trick has a gag, has a thing, but it you need the skill to pull it off.
Yep. I gotcha. And like everybody has that level of comfortableness and the standard that they hold themselves to, and like I am a little bit guilty as to that as well. I sometimes don't take on some projects because I just don't have the skill. I believe I don't have the skill set yet to take them on. And like yes, that does hold me back, so I'm working on that. So because like you can't develop the skills if you don't take on the projects to do the skills.
It definitely becomes a tough edge, doesn't it? Especially when we
Yeah.
start to do this professionally, um,
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. Like if there's some sort of project that somebody's going to pay you good money for, but you're kind of objectively, I guess maybe I'm just thinking out loud with you. I guess if we as entrepreneurs objectively think we don't have the skills to execute that, then
Mhm.
we either need to gain those skills or tell that client, hey, I've never done something like this before. I can't promise how it'll turn out. I'll charge you a reduced rate if you're willing. And they go, yeah, well, now you're learning that way.
Yep.
Or is it fear that's holding us back?
Mhm.
And usually, if it's the fear, we should push through.
Sure. I do have a great example of
Oh,
that as
shoot.
well. I'm going to open up now a bit. Is that I did take on a larger project some odd months ago for doing a large dining table for a friend in high school, and it was one of the first ones of this scale I've ever done, and it involved a lot of like finer work, to get it right. And I charged him a reduced rate. I told him like this is one of the first times I've done this because I knew him, and he was from high school. And I take with things like that, it's like I take my time with it,
Hmm.
almost where it's a fault, like I take my time. I'm like, okay, I really got to think about this. And the reason why is that I like it's hard for me to push through because there's a lot of money in the project of that scale.
Oh,
And I spent a lot of money on wood. Like it was all white oak, very thick white oak. And if I make a mistake with this kind of project, it's almost
ah,
ruined. Like once you cut wood, it ain't going back. you
good
know,
point. Yeah.
so there's a huge financial implication with making a mistake. Same thing with like a project on this scale, this closet sitting behind me. I bought just enough, almost just enough wood just to complete the project. So, and a couple of times I caught myself, where I almost cut it too much, and like I just like wait,
Interesting.
wait, wait, and then a lot of hours are spent in it, and like these two cabinet doors behind me that are leaning up against it,
Yeah.
that took me a good probably whole day to make.
Wow.
Like off
Really?
and on, when I say a whole day, that's with taking
A
breaks,
day
lunch.
of real life time, not necessarily like 8
Yeah.
hours of, yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's because I had just enough wood to do it. We're in the middle of pandemic, and my wood
Mhm.
supplier makes it a real pain in the butt to get stuff, So I was just trying to take it slow, make sure all my measurements were correct. I checked my measurements probably 5 times before I even cut anything, and I just really took it slow, and these are the type of cabinet doors where they have like the tongue and groove joints and everything, So I had to cut all those and just make sure everything fit correctly. And the way you make those is like you cut it a little bit, a little bit, a little bit until you sneak up on the perfect fit for the
Oh.
centerpiece, so it doesn't wobble too much, but it fits in there nice,
Oh.
equally.
Now, how did the table turn out?
Table turned out beautifully.
And
You know,
what were you scared to do it, so to speak? Like, were you kind of scared the whole way, or was this just an initial fear, and then once you were building it, it went away?
it's one of those things where I knew I could do it. I just knew it would be a learning process in while making it.
Okay.
And I also had the financial repercussions that if I make a mistake, I'm going to lose a lot of money, to replace the wood, redo all the work,
Because
you
you
know.
promised him a table. So,
And
yeah.
one of those things with woodworking is that when you do a project like that. See, so the table had two legs, okay? So two big leg sections, and
What do you mean what do you mean by that instead of four legs?
well, it was
Oh, wait, it was two
with
legs
a
and then it could
table
sit. Oh,
with
duh.
with two legs like this that were
Oh,
in X shape. They
got it.
went like this.
Okay. Once
And
I said it, I realized it. Okay. Yeah.
with woodworking, you do all the same cuts at the same time, because you can be off a little bit when you set the table saw to for example, the table saw to a certain measurement, and it can be off a little bit. So if I had to remake a leg because I'm making it separately from the leg I already made, not at the same time, there can be measurements that are off, slightly, and can ruin like the how the table sits.
Oh, wow.
So I was worrying about that too. You know,
Um, what did you learn from that process? I don't mean the technical woodmanship skills. I mean more like you're like, oh, I can do that process again of offering a reduced rate, or were you like, oh boy, I learned I did not have the right tools, or yeah, what did you learn?
I learned that I didn't charge enough.
Even at the reduced rate?
Yeah, by a long shot.
Ah, by a long shot.
Yeah,
Was that because you had to recut wood and made errors, or
I didn't.
because
I I didn't make any errors because I took my
oh, because
time.
you were so careful?
I took my time. I didn't make any errors, but I had a lot going on, so the project took a long time to complete. But he was cool with it. I had a lot on my plate. I was in the middle of moving. I was having a kid. I was doing all this stuff, so it took longer than I believed. But the actual work, it did take much longer and have much more effort than I anticipated.
Mm.
And he ended up tipping me very well.
Oh, that was
So
nice of him to do.
I actually sent him pictures of every day I worked on it. I sent him pictures. And
Oh, that's smart.
he saw how hard I was working on it. And I did not ask for any extra money, but he was very great, generous,
That was
and,
nice of him to
and
do.
tipped me very well because he knew it.
Now that you mention it, whenever I've cut my rate as I learn, I would do that a lot as a lawyer. I'd be upfront with my clients and say, hey, I've never done a project like this before, blah, 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 like we just talked about. Still, in the end, it still was worth way more than what I quoted. And the client would have been happy to pay it, you
Mm-hmm.
know. That's
Yeah.
kind of maybe a lesson to any business person listening to this is maybe instead of cutting your rate by 50%, cut it by 25 or something, or
Yeah. And
because,
I've
yeah.
gotten to, I've realized also that with with woodworking, this may be specific to this, but with woodworking, whatever I think it's going to cost and whatever I think how long it's going to take, double it.
Double it.
It always
Wow.
takes double the time that I think it's going to take.
That's
And
amazing.
so I just started quoting higher and I started quoting longer because it takes longer than I thought.
That's
You
amazing.
know, it just does. And it's always comes out like that. However long I think it's going to take, it takes longer
That's
every time.
amazing.
Every time, no matter what it is, it takes longer.
I thought you would have said 25% increase, but I love how you're like, nope, it takes double.
Yep, almost all the time it takes me twice as long.
Now,
You know.
you know something else I've learned in business too? Proof of point with the magic show. Like I charged 50, people paid me 100. And trust me, as about a year later, I went to 75 to 100 per show. Um, the yeah, people will pay for what they want, and if it's of good quality, not even exceptional quality, but if they're like envisioning that dining room table and it gets delivered the way they would envision it, like a good, well piece. Because if I was making a custom built tiny table, I would expect it not to wobble. I would expect the seams to be very well done, no glue drips. You know, I would expect it to be a finished custom piece.
Yep.
And if that's what
Absolutely.
people can deliver, they will pay. They will
I
pay.
definitely agree with you. You know, there is people out there that will shop at, the bargain stores for something, and then there's people out there that know the value of a
Yes.
custom piece.
I, I'm glad you said that. I should say there's two types of people. There's the
Mhm.
people that will pay, and then there's the people that would never pay that price.
Oh yeah,
But just
they'll never pay a portion of that price.
no, but just because that exists doesn't mean don't do it. Can I share with you another cool entrepreneurial story that you'll think is cool? And
Yeah.
then I want you to educate the listeners because we've only got about 15 minutes left. I want to
Yep.
educate them if they want to get into woodworking, what they should do. All
Okay.
right, here's this other cool entrepreneurial story. So I kind of mentioned to you offhand, I was part of this gaming podcast. It was called the D6 Generation. And the game that we started at about 12 years ago ran for about 10 years. The gaming genre was miniature gaming and role-playing games and European style board games. Well, in the
Okay.
miniature game world, what they are, these little miniatures that are this big, you buy them on a plastic sprue, you glue them together, the hobbyist paints them, and then you can play them on a modeled terrain table. Think trains with the trees and the hills and the rocks, pretend that. Okay,
Yep.
so here we are. We have an army, these little miniatures. Let's say you got 50 of them, and you got these little tank kits that are about this big. They're about the size of a small, about half the size of a shoebox. Okay, or 25% the size of a shoebox. Think of a little tank kit.
Yeah.
Now, how did we bring these armies to play? We would often have a box top, like a paper, like a Staples paper box where you have reams of papers, and we would just line it with maybe some bubble wrap, and you'd lay your guys out in there, and you'd kind of carry these things around. Then there were these foam trays you could buy. It was called pluck foam, and you would pluck them out and carry them around in this soft shell case. And that case would cost about $50. Well,
Yep.
I have a friend who was a bat manufacturer, baseball bat for
Yep.
pro leaguers, and also a gun enthusiast. And
Okay.
so he had the machinery to be able to build these gun cases where we have the custom cutout of the gun, right,
Yeah.
in his foam.
Yep.
Well, he did that for his miniature army. He made custom foam trays that were cut in the shape of the guys. So if the guy was
Yeah.
raised with a big sword up in his left hand pointing up, that was cut out. Okay.
Yeah.
He's holding these trays in an elevator at a gaming convention. A guy goes, "Hey, where'd you buy that?" I didn't buy it. I made it. He's like, "I would buy that." Okay. Well, the material cost on that to make that would be like $150
Yeah.
to be able to carry enough of an army. He
Yeah.
went on the interwebs back in the day. People to try to sell these, they lambasted him, called him ridiculous, stupid, never pay that kind of money. That's ridiculous. Who the hell do you think he is? I mean, they hated him. You know how there's
Yeah.
just nerd rage sometimes about stuff? They just hated him. He pushed through it. He was like, F you all. That's now his company. His
No way.
company is making custom miniature cases He also sells them in hard shells because this was all soft shell before. So if we want to fly to Chicago for one of our big gaming conventions, it's a hard shell case. So the plane, it's all protected. Those run about $300 per case, right?
Wow.
And what he learned, same entrepreneur story we're talking about,
Yeah.
is that people will pay for what they want.
Yeah.
And there's a gamer that says, I'll never pay that. I'll carry them around in a box top. And that's fine
Yeah.
too, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, he sold his back company and now just makes miniature
That
cases.
that's incredible. There's a knack for everything. It's unbelievable.
Isn't that an unbelievable story?
It's pretty much real quick. It's pretty much my keyboard hand rest business.
Oh, do tell.
Is it has just done so well, and it just surprises me because I'm not a gamer. I'm not a mechanical keyboard enthusiast at all. I just had one friend ask me, "Hey, can you make this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" I made a YouTube video about it. You can see how I make them. I have a YouTube video, and
How do people find that they're listening?
they just the YouTube video. My account is Dan Ridley,
Okay.
and I just
So,
have it right online. But I
so if
also
they
have
Googled or if they went into YouTube and said Dan Ridley keyboards, then it would come up.
yeah, probably like Dan Ridley keyboard hand rest.
Okay.
But you can also find it. I have the link in my Etsy store, Etsy.com
How do
store.
people go to there?
Yep. You can actually go to my website, kat dash wood.com, kat-wood.com, and there's a bunch of buttons that direct you to my Etsy store. You can read about me on my actual website, but it'll redirect you to my Etsy store, and I have multiple listings that you can choose. All of the handrest listings have that link to the YouTube video in them.
Okay, good, perfect. All right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's all right there. That's probably the best way to get to it, just off the top of my head right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the keyboard handrest is what launched it, huh?
Yeah, it's just I'm actually still can't believe how popular they are, and it's great.
Yeah.
They just I'm actually coming out with new ones. I'm introducing a African mahogany one and a bloodwood one, which is really cool too. It's a very very deep reddish color with some cool effects in the grain.
That's
So
awesome.
it's coming really soon too.
So if somebody was listening to this and maybe they didn't want to make it their job, but they just have always been interested in woodworking, that have been intimidated because, oh, I don't have shop space, I don't have tools. What would you recommend to them?
Um, Off the cuff,
Yeah.
I say that you can do this in your yard. You don't need a shop. All you need is an electrical outlet, and you can get a pair of saw hosses at Home Depot for $20 a piece, maybe. I'm not exactly sure on the price.
Yeah, yeah, we get you.
Make yourself a table outside. A sheet of plywood's not too bad too, and make yourself a table that you can just put away. And if I had to recommend, just off the top of my head, like essential tools to get, is
Yes.
probably you need something to cut with. So probably a circular saw that makes straight cuts. A drill. You don't need an impact driver. Just a drill will be fine. You can do make holes and shoot screws with the same tool. There's something called a Craig jig
Uh-huh.
that makes pocket holes. It's a hole in the wood that goes up at an angle to attach two pieces together. A lot of
Ah.
um, beginner woodworkers use that tool. It's pretty cheap to get into. It's like $30 for the small
Huh.
kit. They have more expensive kits, but that's something that is handy if you're going to get into just like get into this as a beginner. And probably a jigsaw so you can make some curves and stuff, and cut small pieces. So that'll probably get you into woodworking for a couple $100.
Okay.
You know,
And if you
all.
don't have that, maybe there's somebody that would loan it to you, right?
Yep, there's that too. I mean, you can even go simpler than that and get yourself a handsaw, you know, and just go at it. I mean,
Now,
you can get into that.
here's something that always stumps me. Um, what does the beginner do when you see the circular saw and I don't know, I'm not going to use brand names, but there's the one that's, I'm going to make up a price, $69.99.
Mhm.
And then you see the one that's $129.99. Is this an area where, yeah, spend the more money on the more expensive tool, because it'll last you longer, it'll cut better, or are you like, nope, those tools would be beyond your expertise. You won't get the value out of them unless you're going to stay a woodworker for 10 years. Go
Yeah.
ahead and buy the $69 one. It'll work just fine. And when you want to upgrade, upgrade.
Usually they work in my experience. I'll be honest, I've replaced almost every tool I have with the more professional version. But it depends on if you have the money or not, and how badly you want to do this. That you spend the more money on the tool. I mean, a lot of times it could be branding that makes it more money, or it could be quality. You don't really know, unless you really do your research. But watch a lot of YouTube. That can help educate you. But a lot of times, like for the beginner woodworker, going with the cheaper version to kind of do what you want to do and make sure you want to continue doing it is not a terrible idea, because it's still going to do the job. Like, yes, I have seen over time that the more expensive tools do produce better results for a more professional setting. Like I've upgraded all my big tools to the professional versions, and I see a clear difference. So, but for a beginner woodworker on a budget, it's not a bad idea just to go with, like, the cheaper
Okay.
tools.
Okay. I've noticed it in a few times. Like I think my first what handheld circular saw. What's the kind of one that you hold and it's got, what's that
Yeah,
called?
yeah, it's just circular saw.
Circular
Yep.
saw. I think I had a Sears one that I bought back in college, and
Yep.
then I think I lost it or something, or it got rusted or something happened. So then I had more money, so I bought, I can't remember what brand name, Makita, one of the bigger brand names, and I bought the more expensive one. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I bought that one. That thing cuts like butter. Like I
Yeah.
could not cut with my Sears one back in the day. Not knocking Sears, maybe they had a higher end one. I don't know, but it just the grit, or maybe I had the wrong blade in there. I don't even know. But man,
Could
it would
be.
seem like my cut would be like this, whereas my more expensive one, it's like,
Yeah, that's also a very good point. Is that, my dad has always taught me that you pay if you pay the cheap price, you get cheap quality, cheap results. It's always the case. The more money you pay, the better,
so
usually.
it's not a brand name thing then. It's actually a better tool in your
Yeah,
experience.
you're always like, it always depends. There's tools out there that are expensive, and I believe that it's the brand.
Okay.
I mean, how awesome can a drill be? It turns.
Okay.
But there's some that are really expensive. But there's also, like, the Cadillac of tools, is a brand called Festool, and that's like the really expensive brand. And they do have some stuff that is just above the rest, and then some stuff that you don't really need to spend the money
But maybe the average hobbyist, Home Depot, if you've got the extra whatever for the upgrade, buy what you can afford is a good
on.
measure. Sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Okay.
to definitely start off
Okay.
if you're just looking to make things in your spare time.
Since we've got the video on, give us a quick tour.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my shop. It's a two-car garage. This up here is my wood wall. I got 3 tiers of lumber storage. And over here we start with the planer bunch of clamps. This is my cutting board clamp collection. I got 30 clamps to make cutting boards.
That's
And
awesome.
to work our way around. Go this way, a bunch of cabinets. I have tons of ceiling space, so I keep all my extra tools up top on shelves. We got the giant. This is where you were sitting, up on the planer. I just upgraded to this a couple months ago, and we got the drum sander, the dust collection system. You can see the piping everywhere. Keeps you healthy. And just working around extra wood up here. I got a pellet stove to keep myself warm in the wintertime. And
Love it.
working our way around, we have the lathe over here. Do some nice pen turnings. We started making bowls recently, and all the wood storage for that over here. And just we have 2 tables over here: drill press, drum sander, chop saw, tons of batteries and small tools, some paint storage up over here, and over here towards the middle, we have the table saw. This is actually one of those table saws that has a flesh sensing technology that will break automatically if I touch it.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually, quick story, I actually cut a teeny piece of my finger off, just a little scoop of flesh, and I can't feel there anymore because I had, a table saw that I wasn't paying attention.
And it did not have that flesh sensing technology, or was it too small that it didn't even detect it?
Well, that's actually why I decided to get this table saw, because I was like, I can't have that happen again. I was home alone at the time too. And I actually keep this here to remind myself, this is the blade that did it.
Uh-huh.
I got respect the blade. And that's the one that cut me. So I ended up getting one of those table saws that can sense my flesh, and it has a brake on it that
That's amazing.
it actually it stops the blade and pulls it down into the table in a tenth of a second.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Do you know how it works? Does it sense the difference in material or something?
There's
Or
there's an electric current running through the blade at all times, and if that current changes in the slightest, like from contact from skin, because skin is very moist. So if that current changes, it will trip the braking system, and pretty much there's a cartridge in it, and they're replaceable, and it has a aluminum piece that gets rammed into the blade, and it stops the blade, and the force actually drops the blade into the table so fast you don't even know what happened.
that's amazing. I gotta
Yeah,
write that down.
it's called the saw stop table saw.
Oh, flesh stopping blades.
Yep, they actually have a demo on it using a hot dog.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
And
amazing.
the last thing here is my giant table in the center of the room that I have everything sitting on. It has pockets all around it, so I can
Oh,
keep
I
stuff
love
in
that.
there.
And you built that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for the impromptu. Speaking of saw blades, my wife's running the blender here. COVID-19. We're all under the same roof.
Oh yeah.
Um, Thank you very much for the impromptu podcast. And I think it was super interesting. And tell people again how they can reach you.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I post there a lot. It's just Katerina Woodworks, KaterynA.
And if they
Woodwork.
want to communicate with you, they can do it through those media outlets.
Yep, you can reach me through that, or my website is again kat-wood.com, cat-wood.com.
All right. Thanks again. And everybody, thanks for listening. And until next time, happy networking.
Thank you.